Oh, now, episode 136 of the podcast, a breakdown episode, which means it's just you and me and the other 500,000 people that listen to this podcast. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Wandering DP podcast, where we focus on Leica photography, cinematography, and life offset. And now, your host, Patrick O'Sullivan.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. And this week, as I mentioned in the intro, is a breakdown episode. That means we're going to be going over a recent commercial that we shot. This one was done in Western Australia. We shot on the Alexa XT. We shot Arri RAW. We shot with the Arri Zeiss Master Anamorphics. And a bit of an odd combination of a set, which is what we're going to be talking about. But the commercial is set inside a plane. But the gag is, as every commercial will have somewhere along the line, a gag. The gag is that we didn't want to know that we were in a plane for the 27 seconds out of the 30-second commercial. We didn't want to know we were in a plane. So that's going to be the challenge we're talking about. We're also going to talk about the lighting. It's not a straightforward task, lighting a plane, especially when you don't have all of the toys at your disposal. So we're going to be talking about lighting a plane, what we were going for, what kind of fixtures we needed, the settings on the camera. All of that stuff is going to be in this week's breakdown. But before we get there, over on Patreon this week, we're looking at another live stream. If you are interested in Patreon and supporting the show, thank you very much. Thank you to the supporters that help this show happen each and every week. When I'm racing around trying to fit in these things in between jobs and get the gear together, it is the Patreon people that provide that support necessary to make it all happen. So thank you very much. Now, Patreon, we're doing the live stream. If you've never seen the live stream, or you don't know what it is, or you haven't heard me talk about it for 100 times on this podcast, you can now go on to YouTube and you'll be able to find in the show notes page for this episode 136, I'll have a link there to the YouTube channel. You can go there, and each week I'm releasing a cinematography series, which is just snippets from the live streams, from the Patreon live streams. I'm taking those and putting them into video form so you can get a little tease of what it's actually like. Every week it goes for about an hour or so. And there's questions from Patreon supporters. We go over someone's footage that they have sent in, a project or something like that. And we do essentially what we're doing here. I do it to other people, but I'm most kind to myself. So in the Patreon things, I try and belittle others just to make myself feel better. So that is on Patreon. That's on YouTube if you just want to check it out to see what you're in for. So thank you very much to those people. Now, we are inching closer and closer, and last week I teased it on the podcast, but we are giving away free tickets. And when I say we are giving away free tickets, it's more like the Music Bed told me that I could give away a ticket. Nice enough of them to do that, and I teased it last week, and the competition or the contest starts today. So today is Wednesday, something or other. I'm not sure. I think it's July. That is when the contest starts. You can go to the show notes page, click on the giant button that says win a free ticket to the Film and Music Conference, and that's where you can get started. And you get more entries, the more that you share it, and the more entries, the better the chance of winning. And someone is going to walk away with a ticket with a $599 price tag. So not a bad prize at all. Plus, you get the free ticket. You also get the benefit of going to one of the best film and music conferences in the world. And I don't say that lightly. I don't know how many other conferences are named Film and Music Conference, but this one is one of the top ones. Let's talk about it. It is held in Fort Worth, Texas. It's going to be September 28th through the 29th. And Film and Music Conference brings top creatives and filmmakers together for 2 days of inspiration, education, and new connections. Tickets are $5.99, but you can get 10% off with the code WanderingDP. So even if you don't win the free ticket, you can save some coin by using the promo code WanderingDP, and you can get all of the information at filmandmusic.com. That's all spelled out as you would think, filmandmusic.com. So that is the conference. And we've talked about the benefits of these things before. There is something to gathering in one spot with like-minded people who are all essentially trying to get better. That is why you would go to one of these things. You want to hear the speakers that we're going to talk about in a sec. You want to hear the quality of those voices talking about their experiences inside of the industry so that you can go home, you can take all of that knowledge, and then you can fast forward your career or fast forward your journey into filmmaking and make it a little bit more seamless, a little bit quicker. We want to learn from the mistakes of others. You're going to be hearing from people like Robert Legato, Oscar-winning VFX supervisor who reinvented the film industry when he introduced virtual cinematography and applied it to legendary films like Titanic, Apollo 13, Hugo, The Jungle Book, and many more. So this is the person that introduced virtual cinematography. This is like the old man of Matt Workman. This is the person who was at the cutting edge. And that means if they were at the cutting edge during the time of Titanic, they've probably been there for a really long time. So he's probably still on the edge, and he's seen things the likes that you and I could only dream of. So that's Robert. He's going to be giving a talk. There's Franklin Leonard, the founder of The Blacklist, the yearly publication highlighting Hollywood's most popular unproduced screenplays. If you are a writer and you get on the blacklist, you just count that cash straight to the bank. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it works, but it's everybody knows The Blacklist. If you don't, the scripts have earned 250 Academy Award nominations and 50 wins. That's not a bad strike ratio. What is that? 50, 250? You could probably play in the majors with an average like that. You wouldn't be all-star, but you'd be up there. Franklin has worked in development at Universal Pictures and the production companies of Will Smith, Sidney Pollack, and Anthony Marababa, Leonardo DiCaprio, and John Goldwyn. So very experienced. He's read a script or two. Probably what you don't want to do is put your script in your backpack and force it upon Franklin Leonard when you get to the conference. That's probably going to be a no-no, but who knows? It might work for you. I'm not advocating it, but I'm certainly not going to tell you what you can and can't do. We've also got Rain Allen Miller, a visionary director and writer with a unique storytelling style. She's currently represented at Some Such, a production company featuring some of the top directors in the industry. Rain has worked with leading creative agencies such as Havas, Exposure, and Wyden Kennedy. She developed an award-winning career at Mother London, generating work for clients including Save the Children, Money Supermarket, BAFTA, and IKEA, or IKEA, depending on whether or not you're Swedish. Whew, funny thing is, I think I've actually got a job with next week. I'm coming to LA, and I think it's with them. I may be mistaken, but if anyone from that agency listens to this podcast, I'm probably not going to get the gig by the time I get there. They'll probably have pulled the plug, but I think it's with them. I would imagine. Okay, we'll talk about the other speakers at the end, but there are some great people. They're going to have these little speaking events. You're going to go, you're going to listen, you're going to ask questions, you're going to meet somebody sitting next to you. You guys are probably going to film the next Jaws. And the rest is history, and you have me and the Music Bed to thank very much. So again, filmandmusic.com, that's where you can find more information. Okay, should we get into this week's breakdown? I think we should, because there could be, this has the potential to be a very long episode because there's a lot of stuff to get through, because it's complicated. There's going to be lots of lights. We're in a very tiny, small location. It's all white walls everywhere with beige carpet, and let's get into some of the backstory. So I think to set the scene, we need to know exactly what is happening in this commercial, and the gag that I talked about early in the commercial about not knowing that we're in a plane is really going to be paramount to our lens choice, to our framing, to our lighting, to all of that. So the backstory is there's 4 people inside of a plane, and it's a private plane. It's not one of those big jumbo jetliners. It's a private plane, which means it's really small. That's complication number 1. Right? We're in a very tiny area. That's going to be hard to light. Number 2, backstory. We are not in Los Angeles or New York or somewhere where you would get this thing built on a set, where it would be cheaper to do that than to actually get a plane. We are in Western Australia, which means that it's actually cheaper to go find a plane that we can shoot in and light that and park it somewhere where we can light it and then fit it out inside rather than building the actual structure on the outside. So that means we're in a fucking plane hangar, and we are inside of a real working plane. Luckily enough, production was able to source a plane that was used for teaching students how to be stewards and hostesses. Is that still kosher? One of them is not. Where they teach that. So it's a old 747, and we had to take all of the chairs out. This is in the pre-production process. We do the scout. You can see some of the images, behind the scenes images on the website. Again, wanderingdp.com/episode 136 for all the show notes and for everything to follow along. So, we're inside the 747. We take all the seats out. We put down the carpet. You're talking with the production designer. Okay, this is where we're going to be looking. This is the angle that's going to work. We want to look straight down the hole, and we're going to have couches and sofas and things to block people, because we want the viewer to think that these kids, there's 4 of them, young people, are all sitting in a living room or something like that. And they're discussing what they want to eat. So do they want to eat Chinese? Do they want to eat Italian? Do they want to eat Cambodian? Something like that. they're having this conversation. And as they're having this conversation, the camera is bouncing all around, looking at all of the different viewpoints from these people, because there's 4 people talking. They're all talking to each other. So the camera angles and which side of the line, this is all going to get very confusing. It had to all be worked out beforehand. That's what we're going to be paying attention to here. But then, cut to end of the commercial, they choose Chinese or whatever it is, and we realize they're actually in a plane, and they're choosing not only what to eat in terms of cuisine, but where to go. And they end up, I think, in Beijing or something like that. So that is the gag. Let's look at the actual cockpit. We're going to start this breakdown in reverse to what the actual commercial is, because, as I say, we wanted to keep things very tight on the individuals early on. And as they start talking to each other, we slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger until we reveal, oh, they're not in a living room. They are in a private jet. So that is the gag. Okay. Let's look at the wide shot. Outside in the behind the scenes images, you can see the setup. So you can see it's actually a real plane. What we're going to need, first of all, in parking this thing, is we're going to have to decide what we're going to be doing for lighting. We're going to be here in this spot for 12 hours. How are we going to light this thing up with the budget that we have, the access to the resources that we have? There's no 18Ks here. We're going to have to do everything with smaller fixtures, but we want to light it up, and we want to decide where's the sun going to be, where's the ambient sky side going to be to the thing. So that's why we're going to start looking at this wide shot. You can see there's windows running down both sides of the plane. And if this were a build, if this was a set build, you would try and incorporate as many LED fixtures as you could, running lights along the top to keep things interesting. In the background, you'd have little LEDs that would be color tunable, so you could have them just a little bit of gold, adding intricacy to the background. Here, we don't have that. This is a real working plane. We're not going to be stuffing LEDs. It's not that kind of budget level. We need to light everything from the outside. So it's going to be just sky and sun that we are mimicking. And how are we going to do that? So because there's 4 people talking, there's 2 on each side of the plane, and we're only really going to be lighting this one time, which means we're going to take 2 hours to set up all of the lighting, and then we're just going to shoot in there. We're going to make some small adjustments shot to shot as we go in for the close-ups, because we know we can manipulate things further in the close-ups. But we're going to shoot the wide first, and then we're going to spray the rest of everything else down. But really, it's about creating that base for the wide shot. So what did we do to create the sky and the sun? Well, we had to decide on an angle. The most important person in this commercial, the person who's delivering the most lines and who we want to make look the best, is the female camera left on shot number 1, the wide shot. Camera left there. She's looking back towards camera. She's telling the captain where they're going to be dining that evening, and she's the most important. So we decided, okay, we'll have the sun coming from that side, which is the left side, and we'll have ambient sky on the right. What is going to differentiate those two? We can do it a few different ways. We can differentiate sun side from ambient sky side by color. So it can be more yellow, more blue, less blue, and level as well. So more level coming from that side than coming from the other side, because you're going to have direct sun. And in the pre-production process, talking with the director and looking at references that he had sent through, we decided we didn't want super crazy, harsh, no high cloud sun just piercing through the windows, creating shafts. It wasn't supposed to be that dramatic. It was supposed to be just a little bit lighter and a little bit less contrast. So to do that, with all of the fixtures that we had access to, we chose 6Ks down the left-hand side of the plane. And a 6K will give you a bit of punch, but we are inside of an airport hangar. We're not outside. We chose inside because we wanted to control things. We knew we would have access to the lamps and enough power to generate everything, so we didn't have to worry about outside and then tracking the sun. We're inside of a hangar, but it's a working airport hangar, right? This is not a grid. There's no place to put lights or anything like that. So everything has to come from the floor. So on the pre-production, on the tech scout, we decide, okay, sun is going to come from the left-hand side. We're going to run 3 6Ks down the left-hand side of the plane, or 2 6Ks, sorry. 2 6Ks and 2 4Ks. So the 6Ks are going to be the main sun source, and they're going to be going through, because if we're shooting a 5600 Kelvin daylight, as HMIs are, or close to that, they're always a little bit fucked up. We're going to shoot at that. We want the sunny side to be just a little bit warmer, a little bit more sun than the ambient sky side. We could have gone crazy with this, but we wanted to keep it fairly neutral. So for the sun, we've gone quarter CTS on all the lights on the left-hand side. So that's 2 4Ks, 2 6Ks. The 6Ks being the main push, which is all of the windows in shot number 1. All of the windows on the left-hand side are getting hit with 2 6Ks. And the 6Ks go through the CTS, the quarter CTS. Then they hit a 12 by 12 of quarter grid. So not very, very soft, but slightly soft. And a 12 by 12 is going to give you, if you step back away from it enough to get enough coverage on the entire 12 by 12, it's going to give you a nice softness to it. But we're not knocking out a whole lot of level because it's only quarter grid. So we've got CTS to a 12 by 12 of quarter grid. And the thing that we're going to be playing with the most from shot to shot is just the angle of where those lights are, because we don't have cherry pickers. We don't have the ability to move like that. We've just got rolling stands on the ground. They're fully cranked up to be able to get through the windows. And we didn't want steep angles on the light because we didn't want the light going straight into the ground. We wanted to give it a little bit of push into the interior of the cockpit for 2 reasons. Number 1, it was way cheaper because the stands could only go so high. So to get any higher and get those shafts of light coming down into the ground, that was going to be significantly more expensive. So we did not do that. And number 2, it just makes the contrast a little bit less and fills the room a little bit more, makes it feel just that little bit brighter. So down the left-hand side, as I say, 2 of the 6Ks, those are the windows that we can see. Now, if you look closely at the chair on the left-hand side, the front of it, which is the back to camera, that's also got level. Where is that coming from? Well, that's a 4K through an 8x8 parked out in front of the 6K, so closer to the camera, and it's actually behind the camera pushing towards our talent. So just a little bit, and that is through half grid. So it's parked up right near the window, 4K through the CTS with half grid, taking a little bit more level out of it. It's not as much level anyway because we're coming from a 4K, so that's why it looks a little bit down there. And that gives us our start. That's our base. Okay, our sun is that. Now we need to balance the other side, the ambient sky side, to that. We need to make it feel natural, which is going to be just a little bit down, not crazy amounts down because we don't want too much contrast, just a little down, and a different color, slightly bluer. So because we've warmed up with a quarter CTS, that means on the other side, in the same spot where the 6Ks are, we're going to have 2 4Ks, and they're going to be going through half grid. And they're not going to be going through color correction. So they're going to come through at their natural 5600 Kelvin, which is going to be whitish light to the camera as we're shooting at daylight. So the windows that you see in the wide shot, those are being lit up with 4Ks through a 12 by 12 of half grid. And you can actually see the 12 by 12, and we had to play with the angle a little bit. In the wide, you can see the 12 by 12 in the windows frame right. And interesting to note that those are out the window. That's a 12 by 12 of half grid, but it's not blown out. It's not blown out, yet it's all white because we're just playing on the edge of blowing out. Also, good to note, I should mention, this was shot on the Zeiss Master Anamorphics, the Arris, and this is the 28mm, which is an amazing lens. This is very, very wide. You're talking 14mm in spherical, and we shot the whole thing wide open. So this is T1.9, and we used a black ProMist filter, which was just a quarter, I think. Just a quarter. That's what's happening around those windows. So you see the white frame. We just wanted to make the outside less noticeable. That's what that ProMist can it's like a glimmer glass. It just ever so slightly softens the contrast and just gives that little something to the highlighted area. So around that window on frame right, that's where you can see the effects of the ProMist. And the 12 by 12 doesn't look blown out because it's not blown out. It's just white, very close to clipping, but not clipping. So that's the interesting point here. The other thing to notice in this wide shot, which is going to make our lives much more complicated going forward, is getting shape on everybody's face when everyone's facing different directions. Everyone is facing different directions inside the plane, which means we really need to lock down where we're going to be shooting from and how we're going to go about getting shape. So this is going to be the interesting part of this shoot. Plus, we've got all of those chairs blocking the light on frame right. So things are about to get very complicated. The wide is the easiest shot. What we need to get in that wide shot is just the basic angle, the basic level, and the shadows. We don't have to create anything too crazy pretty. We're just going for setting the mood as best as we can, and that's using those 6Ks and 4Ks. Then also on frame right, you've got another 4K just like we had before, and it's through a 4x4 of 216, and that's pushing light towards our man in the front seat here, frame right. So those are the three, well, what do we got? 6 lights there. Then overhead, you can see that we're using a few of the practicals on the plane. They had really shitty green LEDs, but we took a color temperature reading of them, the gaffer. We applied a little bit of gel, and then we turned off all of the ones in the background that were affecting the wood because we just wanted something nice, not a whole lot of shape up against the wood, but we didn't want these harsh LEDs hitting them, so we only left a few on. The other ones we just taped up and covered up because you couldn't individually control them. In the background, you'll see another 4K frame left is coming through the window in the background. There's a window that's like the exit door, the emergency exit door to a big plane. And we just opened that entire door and we floppied it off so it looked like a very small window. Then we had a 4K through another 4x4, I think of half soft frost. And that is what is creating that shadow in the background. We tried without, but it just looked a little bit dead. So we decided, no, we needed to light up that area and we were going to keep it. So that is the entire shot. We've set the mood. We tried a little bit of haze. It did not work. It basically smoked the entire plane out. So we quickly canned the haze. But that's our base level, right? Now, okay, now we've got our orientation. This is what would be the final shot in the ad. Everybody's skin looks nice. We've all got some direction. You can see the guy in the background. He's got a little bit of edge light from the left. He's got a little bit of key from the right. Our woman on the sofa who's laying down, she's going to be the hardest because she's very flat in this shot because camera right, she's getting blocked by the sofa from all of the ambient skylight. And from camera left, she's getting that sun, but she's not getting any direct sun. So it's going to be really interesting to try and keep up shape once we go in for the closer stuff. So now let's start. We're going to run the commercial as it would be from the top. This is our opening shot. Now, I mentioned this a few times. We wanted to keep things very tight on people having this conversation at the start because we didn't want them to know that we were in a plane. We wanted it to be indecisive as to where they were. So our opening shot of our ad is here, and it's on our star lady. And here is where you can see the 6K coming from camera right through that window. We've got a piece of diffusion right up against that front window. So that window that you see in the background is not actually lighting her. It's the next window over. And one of the great things about shooting inside of a plane like this is we were able to use the window shutters just to close off all of the light rather than changing the lights outside. If we needed a little bit more shape, I'd just go along and half close the shutter or fully close the shutter. So now as we go in for the close-ups and we're trying to create some shape, I'm doing that to all of the right-hand side of the camera. So the chairs and their placement in the plane never move throughout the ad. They never moved while we were shooting it. We shot them where they were actually placed. So now that you have that geography, you'll know when I say behind me, there's a whole row of windows, our ambient sky windows. We just closed all of those because we didn't want any light pushing back into our female talent here. We wanted all of the light to come from outside and all of the shape to come from outside. So we've got that 6K camera right through the quarter CTO, through the 12x12 of quarter grid. That is our main light. We've got a piece of diffusion right on that window so that it doesn't blow out and get too hot and see the 12x12 frame. And then the next window down, the window that you can't see to the right-hand side, that is the window that is actually lighting our talent. That is the window that you can see the little eye light that we've got there. And then once we've set that level, we say, okay, we've got that light, that's coming in on her, that shape looks good. We don't need anything else. Now we set all of the other levels to her. So we're going to set the fill now because we've set our stop. We're going to set the fill by just bringing in blacks. So camera left, we've got 2 4x4 floppies that barely fit inside this plane. They're all scrunched over, and we just edge them towards our talent until we're sucking up all of that shitty ambient light that we don't want. We played with adding a little bit of edge light on her, a little backy edge light, but it didn't work because the chair was so high that she was sitting in, and she's got her hands on top of the table. She's looking forward, trying to contemplate what she wants to do for dinner. And it all looks good, right? We've got just the 6K, we've got just the neg, that all looks good, but we just wanted to slightly wrap around that key light, just a little bit more. That 6 was coming at such an angle and we were in such tight quarters that it just wasn't enough. So we added a light mat at a very dim setting, probably the dimmest setting that it could possibly go. And we just bring that forward. And what that's doing is camera right, it's parallel with her face. And it's the long ways. The 2L is the long version, the long skinny version. It looks sort of like the same size as a Kino 4x4. And it's set on the dimmest setting. It's got a little grid on there. And that's just pushing a little bit of fronty light to add as a wrap. You can see it on her cheek is the main spot where you want to be looking. That little bit of wrap and that little eye light, that's all from, well, the eye light is a combination of the two, but that extra push is just from that light mat. That just adds the wrap, because if you don't have that, it just starts to get a little crunchy. And if you were in a world where you could maneuver her and position her, we could probably angle her to get more wrap from the key by looking a little bit more towards the window. But in this little airplane, we were not in a position to do that. So we just brought in that light mat, just frame right, just out of the shot, just adding just that tiny bit of wrap. And then all the shape comes from the neg. And then this is the 135 millimeter master anamorphic. This is wide open. So you can see the focus is, it's one of her eyelashes on her near side eye. That's all you get. It's incredible, the lack of depth of field when you really open up on that lens. And you can feel, this is the start of the ad. It's feeling very compressed. You have no idea where this person is. You only know that's a airplane window because I told you. If you didn't know, you'd think, oh, we've got some reflective things in there. And also, this is part of the frame. You know, we're looking over that arm, that composition. That line is just leading us into her face. The other part of her arm leads us away from her face. And then you've got that glass, that water element in the front of the frame. We're just adding depth, adding layers as we go. So that is shot number 2. Now, for the blocking and keeping track of where we're supposed to be looking and what side of the line we're supposed to be on, that woman in that chair, she hears from this lady what this lady wants to eat. She pops out a suggestion. I want to have sushi. Well, now we're putting her on the right and our lady on the left, because that's where she's looking. In this very first shot, she's looking frame right. As we switch to our second shot of the close-up versions, now this woman is looking frame right to frame left, but we position her a little bit to the center. The composition is just a little bit to the center of the screen, so it's nothing too crazy. So this is what I said before. This was going to be our hardest shot. This woman, she's sitting there. She didn't have a lot of shape in the wide because the sofa was blocking her. So now we need to get some shape onto her. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to eliminate everything from behind because that ambient sky was doing nothing for us. And we're going to use the 6Ks with the CTS through the 12x12 quarter grid outside. We're going to turn one of them off, which is the closest one to camera in the wide shot. We turn that one off. We don't need that one. That's doing nothing for us. We leave the back one on, which is pushing level back in from the back of the plane to the front of the plane. We leave that 6K up. So now we only have one directional key light. That is the big light outside. We're pushing all of the level from one direction, that's frame left, and now you can start to see some of the shape on her face. The key thing to look out for in all of these close-ups is the eye light, because we've got that row of windows, which is acting as the eye light, but then right at the end of that row of windows, if you look really, really closely, you can just see in her eye a slightly larger window, and that larger window is the light mat 2L. Again, it's light, it's small, it can run off battery, so we have a lot of flexibility inside of the plane to be able to use that, because all 4 of the talent, the entire time we're shooting, they're all sitting in their spots, they're having this conversation for real, just to keep the timing and the tempo and the performance there. So we need to be very lightweight with our instruments and how fast we're able to move. So we just use that light mat 2L, and it's the same concept as the last shot. The 6K is doing all of the work, and then the light mat is just adding that little bit of reach. Just reach around to the other side of the cheek. And that's where you get that key look from. Then, frame right, we've got floppies in behind us, which are sucking up all of the light that's bouncing around the plane from where we don't want it. And that's what's adding that shadow just in the middle of the frame on the near side of her cheek. And then to counter that, we've got our 4K through the 12x12 of half grid out the window. And what we've done with the window is just half shutter the window from the inside. You can't actually see it, but just frame right. there is a window in the plane. And if you had it all the way open, that 4K would be going everywhere and would look a lot less shapely. So what we've done is just half shut it. And that's what's providing that cooler blue edge light in her hair, and just lights up the hair and gives it a point of interest. And then we're using the sofa, or using the chair that the woman was talking on previously in the last shot. We're using that to mask some of the frame so we don't see that, wait a sec, we're in a plane. We're using that to mask some of the sofa to make it a little bit more believable. But that's it here. So we shut off a few of the lamps, we closed a few of the shutters, but we're able to move very quickly and still get some shape. Now, you can't go crazy with the difference in shape. If you look at shot number 3 versus the wide, yes, there is a change in shape, but it's not so out of the ordinary that you would be able to pick up on it as you were watching. It should just feel neutral and very true to the wide shot. So here, but there is shape. It's not flat. You look at the left-hand side of her face, frame left, and you look at the right side of her face, the nearer to camera, there is that gradual fall off from lighter to darker. And, it's not a horror picture, so it's not crazy amounts of contrast, but it is there. And using that long lens, again, the 135 millimeter, to just really compress that space and make you feel like you don't know where you are, like these people could be anywhere. So those two are having a conversation. Now, another person butts in. The third member of our cast butts in, and it's our man in the back left. And this is where you can start to see the strategy come to fruition. The plan working is that now, because we've gone sky ambient, frame right, sun left, now we're starting to create these shadows inside that we had planned for. We can highlight those as we move closer. So from frame right, we've got our 4K through 12 by 12 through quarter grid. That is what is providing what would be in this case our key light. We've got the 6K with a quarter CTS through the 12 by 12 quarter grid frame left. It's coming through the windows, and the process is similar every single close-up. So every single time we step into one of these, we're blacking out the entire area behind the camera, so we get no ambient spill. We're getting no bouncing around the cockpit or the hull, and we are directing the lights per close-up. So we're moving them, we're tilting them, we're shifting them around so that we get the angle that we needed. So it doesn't always match the wide. The level of light doesn't always match the wide, but the idea is similar, right? Once you set that base level, you can't really stray from there. So we're looking just to keep it consistent. And you got that warmer look on frame left on his edge light. This was all planned out ahead of time. Okay, we know he has to be sitting this way. If he's sitting the other way, if he's sitting more towards the camera, the angle is not going to look near as nice on his skin because he won't have that shadow running down his face. What he'll have is just the 6K and the 4K competing, and it'll just create flatness. There won't be any three-dimensional quality to the image. It'll just look really flat, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So in the pre-production process, talking with the director, we go around with Artemis, and you're sitting there with your little iPhone app, and you're going, okay, that works for this conversation, but then this person butts in. Where do we go from there? And it took a while, but we finally got everyone positioned where we knew we could still keep shape and the conversation could make sense. So this is the angle that we landed on for him. So because the conversation is switched from our two ladies now to our lady who was last speaking to a new gentleman at the back of the plane, we then switch her line side. So now she's frame right. You can just see her hair frame right. She's blocking some of the plane that we didn't want to expose. We're only looking at the wood and a little bit of a bookshelf in the background and what looks to be a window. And she's blocking some of the shittiness. He's getting hit up with that key light from frame right, which is the 4K, a little bit bluer. Then outside we've got that warmth. And then that shadow comes from us again, just walking in some neg, frame left. You can't go right on them in this situation because you don't want it to be overly contrasty. You want to be in that world of the wide shot, but we still want some shape. So we just walk in that floppy. And then again, we use our trusty light mat to just add just that little bit more smoothness, right? It's the gradation between the key side and the fill side that we want to be just a little bit more, just a little bit softer, not quite as harsh, not quite as dramatic. So that's what that light mat is doing up there. So again, turning off lights, closing shutters, you can see the window frame left. Actually, it's half shuttered. So it's half closed. And I imagine all of the windows were like that, just so that the background wasn't quite as lit up as it possibly could have been. We didn't want to flatten it out so much, the background. So to keep a little bit of shape, you just take the shutter down, just cut down the light levels, see, okay, once you do that, you just look at the monitor. You say, okay, where is our skin level sitting for our talent? Is it bright enough versus the background to still read? If it's too bright, if the background's too bright, it's just going to all be very flat. If it's too dark, people are going to be like, what the hell's going on? It wasn't like that in the wide shot. You just have to find that right balance that you can get away with and still maintain some shape. Okay, next, we go from talking to that gentleman to now we are talking to our fourth guy. This will be the last character that we have to introduce, and we're going to introduce an entire new viewpoint. So, guy is looking frame. What is he looking from? He's on the frame left, looking frame right. Then we reintroduce our guy from the wide shot. This is the first time we see him. Now we're going to be looking at him square in the middle of the frame, but he's going to be looking frame right, which is where our guy was coming from previously. So we've got our two people from behind. Now we've switched the point of view that we're looking at, and this is what we end up with. This is our switch moment. So he's smack bang in the middle of the frame, but he's looking frame right. And now you can see where taking advantage of our sofas and taking advantage of our chairs to create the shape for us. So with the way that we angled this guy's chair in the wide shot, now that means we can use it to cut a bunch of light and create some shape on his face. So in the background, we've got our two 6Ks. They're both frame right. That's our sun side, if you'll remember. Then frame left, we've got our two 4Ks that are through the quarter grid, making it just a little bit softer. But the majority of the 4K light is getting blocked by the chair, and it's lighting up the little glass elements that we've placed in front of the frame. Again, the 135 millimeter, just to really crunch it up, keep it tight, keep it sharp, keep it closed in until we open it up at the very end. Then in the background, we've got more out of focus elements. Glass we're trying to make it seem like a private jet, seem upmarket, so hence the glass and the wood tones and the creaminess. That's in the background. And once we get that wrap from the 6K, we got our levels, we've set everything to that. We can sort of cheat the shadows a little bit more by using floppies because of the chair. If the chair wasn't there blocking the light, it'd be hard to justify the floppies. But because we'll see those in the wide, we know, okay, we can cheat it a little bit more. So we've walked in floppies right behind the camera. We're just hanging them over, and that's what's providing all of that shadow on the near side of his face. And then to get the wrappiness, this time we didn't want a eye light in that near side eye. It just seemed a little bit too weird that it was coming from that direction. So the light mat is still playing, but it's playing at a much steeper angle to his face relative to the camera, which means you're not going to get that eye light in his eye. You can only see windows in his eyes. You can't see the actual light mat. So it's still there. It's still tuned up to the same color as the stuff that was coming through the window from the 6K. It's just adding a little bit of level. And then in the background, all we've done to control that level is the same trick that we used previously, where we're lowering the shutters almost to the point where they're fully closed, the windows in the background. So the windows on the right-hand side of the plane, they're almost fully closed. It's just, you're just leaking in just a tiny, tiny bit of light. And then we use 3 or 4 of the main lights, or the main windows from that side as the key light with that 6K pouring through. So again, something that's fast and that's easy once you get it all set up are those shutters, making it quick to work. So now we've seen everybody once. We've seen all of their positions. We haven't seen where we are. Everything is going to plan. Now we cut back to our woman who's going to be doing the ordering, our main talent, the person that we set up all of these chairs to make this particular shot look good, because this is where a lot of the dialogue was going to be delivered. We wanted this shot to look nice. And this is also the hardest shot from a technical perspective, because the entire time so far in all of the shots, we've been looking along the windows. And when you look along the windows, what you can do is you don't really have to worry about what's outside them, because you can't really see that much. But here now, we are going perpendicular to the windows. We're looking flat, dead on to the windows. So we need to make sure that outside reads as sky. So how are we going to do that? Well, behind in the window here, we're not going to use any VFX or anything. It's just going to be blue screen, but we're going to raise up the blue screen and light it. And just that little bit of light is going to give our bluish screen just that hint of blue, which is her sky behind her, frame left. That's outside. That's just our frame with just a hint of blue. And then you look frame right, and it's a little bit whiter. We're selling that as clouds, and that is the actual light source. And again, just like when I mentioned in the first shot, the 12x12s are lit up with a 6K, but they're not blowing out. They're not blowing out because of the amazing range on the Alexa, but also because it softens it off so much. We've ND'd down so much. It's not like we're inside the plane without any ND. I would imagine, I think this is either like a 1.5 or a 1.2, so we've way lit over what we need. But we're doing that to make sure that for this particular shot, we don't blow anything out. It doesn't look like complete ass. So that's why we've lit it to this extent. And of course, the farther away you get the lights, the larger the sources you get the lights, the easier it is to work with and the more natural that it looks. We've talked about the Hollywood look a bunch of different times. So now we've got our two 6Ks that were side by side with each other. Now we've separated them. We've separated them to make room for the blue, but we've also separated them because we're going to shoot in at an angle. And you can see here our talent is getting hit frame right and getting hit frame left with those hot edges. Those hot edges create a little V on her face. And then what's coming in on her is the ambient sky, or what would be the ambient sky for people not really paying attention to the ad, or not paying attention to the cinematography. They'd think, oh, that's just that ambient sky coming back. But it's got to be down. It's got to be down because she's looking back into the plane. And we wanted some shape. So it can't be like we can't be pushing those 4Ks back onto her because that would be too much level. It would flatten everything off. So we use the same trick. We floppy a neg all behind the camera. So we're completely eliminating the 4Ks from the sky side. All right, this is where, if it isn't already confusing, this is where it gets confusing. I've completely negged all of the 4K. The 4K is out of action. We're using our two 6s and whatever bounces back off of the chair, off of the, off of her seat, off of the sofa frame right, off of the sofa frame left that are behind me. Those things are still exposed. And they're picking up a little bit of something from the 6K. And that's just giving us our bounce back. And then to keep things interesting, again, we're using the light mat at the lowest possible level just to add a little bit of fronty push because it was too dark. It was too dark in here. The contrast was too great. We could have opened up the neg a little bit. We could have played with a little bit of maybe passive bounce right by her to give her that just that lift in level that we needed. We didn't want to raise her up crazy amounts, but we just wanted to lift her a little bit from the shadows. So we could have done that a whole bunch of ways. The quickest, because we had the light mat already set up for the other shots, we'll just wheel in the light mat, get it right above the camera, just put it on. So you're just pushing back the tiniest little bit of level. And that's how we get this shot without blowing out the windows, with getting a little bit of fake blue in the background, and then keeping it, again, on the 135 millimeter. Nice and sharp, but all of this only works because of the planning and pre-production of exactly the blocking and exactly the angles that we were going to be able to get inside this plane, because we couldn't get rid of a wall and walk back 10 feet. We were stuck inside this little tiny cockpit. Okay, from there, we now make the switch to different levels, different eye levels. We're looking at the same guy that we just looked at. They're now having a back and forth conversation, but we want to keep it interesting. We don't want to keep it dull and boring. So we're going to change levels, and we're going to change levels not only to keep it interesting, but also to say, okay, something's changed. And that's what's happening during this conversation. So as we come up and now we're looking down, that gives us another opportunity to showcase a different part of the plane. Again, you still can't see that we're inside of a plane in this shot. We're looking right at our man. He's looking in the same direction as he was before. So we're able to use the same key direction. We're able to use the same fill direction as before because we sold that in that shot. Now we have to live with it. So our blocking and our camera angle has all been determined. We're just raising up in height now, looking down into an area. We play with it. I think we ended up sitting him on some boxes a little bit higher than you normally would be, so that we could separate the background and get just what we wanted in the background. We just wanted little hints of, hey, there's something back there. There's some shape. We're not just looking at a white wall inside of a plane, or a boring white wall. We've got a little bit of sofa, frame left, or a little bit of chair. We've got a little bit of something in the background, what looks like a wooden panel or a wall or a desk. It could be anything. And then there's a small change in the color of the background as well. That whiteness slowly softens off. But here, again, same fixtures from the outside, right? We've got our sky blue, our ambient blue, which is the 4K through the 12 by half grid outside, frame left and from behind. And that's what's giving him that little bit of an edge light, that little hair light that's bluer. Then from inside, we've got our 6K. But the 6K is really, in this case, toned down a lot because it was so far away. The 6K was so far away from him that by the time we got into the plane, it really started affecting the entire background. And we could have flagged that off from frame right. We could have flagged off the 6K doing the shitty bits. But because we were using the light matte already, and it was on such a low level, we just decided to keep that light matte and kill with the shutters on the plane, kill a bunch. I would say 90% of the 6K is killed just by dragging down the shutters and closing off those windows. And then we just use the light matte to get a little bit higher of an angle because we're up high, to just push light downwards at him. And that's how we get that shadow around his nose. And the giveaway as to what is going on here, the tricks that we're trying to pull, is the eye light. He's just got just a single eye light, and that is the light matte turned vertical and then just ever so slightly pushing down onto him. And then frame left, we've got floppies, two of them, two 4x4 floppies frame left to cut off the other 4K coming from the fill side and the 6K, which would have been right behind the camera, which we didn't want. So really it's about moving that floppy light matte setup from shot to shot and making sure they're looking in the right direction. Because if he was looking, instead of looking from left to right, if he's looking from right to left, that does not look nice, that shot. That looks really, really fronty, and it will wash out all of the contrast. His face will end up being the same level as the sofa. The background will be darker. It'll just look really, really funky. So making sure in our chats with the director in pre-production, yes, this is what's going to happen. We're going to shoot him at this angle because we're coming in with this light that we've sold 6 shots ago. There's no change in it once we get in here. Because if you're going to change the direction, that's when people start to see the fuckery. And that's when it starts to get a little bit weird. So that's it. That's close-up, the second to last close-up. And then finally, someone makes a decision. And of course, it's our star, our lady here. She finally makes a decision for Chinese. And we open it up ever so slightly. I think this is the 100. Right before we reveal that we're inside of a plane on the 28 millimeter. So we've gone 135, 135, 135. You open it up just a little bit to get the hint of the idea. But in this final shot, we're still looking through a whole bunch of stuff. You still don't know exactly where we are. We've opened it up and you can start to see, if you saw this ad twice, you'd put it together in the background. Wait a second. Those are airplane windows in the background. But again, using that black pro mist, it just gives us a little something in the shadows. Just a little something in the highlights. Just to mist out those things and just give them a little bit of something. And that's what's happening with those windows back there. This is much the same setup as all of the rest of the close-ups. We've just had to move things out. And you can see now, this is, I think, I wouldn't be showing it to you, I think this is the shape that we were going for all along. This was going to be the money shot of the ad when she sort of hits you with the bang. Let's go get Chinese, and then the gag of being in a plane. This was the money shot that we needed, and we were designing all of the lighting, hoping to get this angle, and we got it. And that's 6K in the background, going through all of the good stuff. That's lighting up the windows in the background. Then we've got the 6K going through all of the junk for our key light. That's where you can see the harshness on her face. That's coming from the 6K. But that harshness on the face, we then had to translate that into softness and softy wrapness to match the contrast in the rest of the ad. So we're again using the light matte 2L, and it's in the long mode, right? It's not vertical, it's horizontal, and it's coming from the plane window across the hull, and it's just adding as a big wrap source. It's right out of frame right. It's the same color as the 6K coming through the CTS. We've all matched it up, and you can see the eye light that she's got in her left eye, which would be the eye closest to the center of the frame. That is the light matte. Without that light matte, the angle that she's looking at, she wouldn't get the eye light from the windows. So that's why, again, we went with that idea. Then frame left, we have our floppies, and behind the camera, we've got our floppies. So we're just cutting off all of that shitty light and just wrapping around the key to make sure that we not only get an eye light, but we get that. You see how it goes from golden hues in her hair. It slowly tracks it gets harsher just above her eye, it gets harsher on her nose. Then on the other side of her face, it's nothing but softness. And it creates that, I think, polished just a very polished look, nice and clean and crisp, which is what the master Anamorphics deliver. And then you've got those little things in the foreground to break up the frame. We walked in a little bit of the sofa. We walked in a bit of the lampshade, played with the level, and then we made sure we were in just the right spot. So in the background, nothing's competing with her head. She's in between two windows. The windows aren't slicing through her nose or through her eyeballs. The background is quite clean and pristine. And then in the foreground, we're not losing any information behind the lampshade or behind the sofa. It's all manicured to make sure that we get a clean view of this moment when she decides, okay, no, it's going to be Chinese. And that's it. This is all Rec 709 stuff, all the grabs. There's nothing crazy going on here with the color, just standard. It's all about making sure that you're not blowing things out of the water with the lights and getting the position right and the blocking, because the lighting was dictated by the space. We couldn't really do that much. We could decide, okay, are we going to push light into it? Are we going to pull the light towards us when we're in that wide shot? As soon as we set the wide and we set the location of everyone with the director, well, then it's about, okay, now how do we get shape in there? What angles can we take in the close-ups to maintain some shape? Because you could easily go wrong, right? If you would have done the flip side of everything we did, you would have had frontiness, you would have had flatness, you would have had something that didn't have the light to dark thing that we always talk about. We're still fighting for that. Even though we're in a white plane with white walls everywhere, we're still fighting that, and fighting it just enough to the point where it's believable, because you could overcook it 100%. You could overcook the contrast and go from the wide to a close-up and be like, holy shit, what happened to that person's face? Why are they so dark now? So that is the danger. But I mean, it's pretty easy now, right? You set the stop on the first close-up, and then you say, okay, team, we're shooting wide open. We're shooting every shot wide open. The gaffer knows what stop they got to get to on the person. You're double checking with false color. You're double checking with previous shots. If you've got Q-take or an uptake system, you're just matching shots on the go. It's not near as complicated as it sounds. And, we're moving quickly, but we don't have to do that much rearranging because of the limited options. We've only got lights outside. We've only got a light mat inside. We don't have to worry about changing things from shot to shot like mad, because it's all set up for ourselves. So that's what I would say is important to remember if you come across this situation, is you have to take your limitations and say, okay, how can we make this work for us? Well, we can make it work for us by working really fast as soon as we set the thing up once. So you talk with the producer, you talk with the first AD and the director, and you say, listen, we're going to eat dick on the first part of the day. It's going to take us 2 hours to set all this stuff up. But as soon as we do that, I've got this plan that can take us and move really, really quickly inside of it, so you get your full 8 hours or you get your 10 hours of coverage once we get that lighting set up. And then you have to stay true to that word. You can't be dicking around for 30 minutes in between shots going, oh, why don't we move the 4K that way? No, you got to come up with quicker solutions, like closing the shutters or like bringing in the light mat. Those things can help you save time. The director's happy because they get more time on performance, and the producer's happy because they don't have to pay overtime. So that is it. Inside of a plane. We hadn't done a plane yet, and now we have. So there's that. Whew. Okay. That's it for this podcast, I think, for the breakdown stuff. Now, Patreon, make sure you check out the live stream this week. It will be at its normally scheduled time. And then I'm off to LA. A week in LA. So there'll be no live stream the following week. We'll have a break. We'll have a few interviews on the podcast back to back, and then we should be back at the breakdowns in August. Lots of fun stuff coming up. Lots of great interviews coming up. Patreon supporters, thank you very much. Please check there for all of the updates, all of the notions of podcasts to come, because if we're not doing a live stream for the Patreon supporters, we're doing some sort of podcast or a download of a template or a lighting diagram, something like that. And I'm looking forward to the weeks to come. Now, check out YouTube too, if you haven't, please. I know it's hard to sit there and watch me, but not for me, more for the cinematography series. I think it could be fun. I think there's so much stuff that happens in those live streams that it would be a shame to keep it all bottled up. So I'm hoping that that people enjoy that little segment. And if you're a new listener to the show and you enjoyed what you just heard and you got anything out of the breakdown, I would really appreciate it if you would go and leave a review on iTunes. It does help new people find the show when they type in cinematography and the podcast doesn't come up. It's because we don't have enough reviews. So I would appreciate it. I get a lot of feedback from people that enjoy the show. So keep that coming as well. It's always nice to hear from people who have learned stuff and who have taken their work to the next level, because I've seen in the Patreon group when we're breaking these things down for the live stream, there's such good stuff now. I'm surprised at how good this stuff, and that sort of sounds like an insult to you, which I guess it should be. You're listening to me talk. I'm surprised at the level, because there's some really, really good stuff going on, and stuff that you look at and you're like, wow, this is high quality stuff. And it's nice to think that we as a podcast have had some hand in making that happen. So I appreciate the feedback and would love a review. You can be honest. Tell me that you are a big fan, or tell me that you don't like it. Okay, and the music bed. We talked about it before the breakdown. Film and music conference. We're giving away free tickets. We're giving away a free ticket, $600 value. Go to the show notes page, share it with your friends, get more entries, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to Music Bed, their YouTube channel, their Instagram. Every single time you do one of these actions, you get more entries. More entries means a bigger chance of winning. And this is not a weekend to miss, the 28th and the 29th in Fort Worth, Texas. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun because you're going to be there with a bunch of people that are nice, a bunch of people that the music bed and film supply, the people that they attract, the kind of people that they have on their site, the talent that they have. There's going to be concerts, there's going to be breakout groups, there's going to be keynote speakers like we mentioned earlier. There's going to be the Twin Towers, Aaron and Winston. They are multi-award-winning filmmaking duos. These people, they are at the razor's edge of cracking in to the good stuff. Their short film, Sleep Well, My Baby, was awarded a Webby Honorable Mention, Vimeo Staff Pick, and was distributed as the 4th installment of the Film Supply Presents series. These are the people. They know the system. They know how to work it. You're gonna get your Vimeo Staff Pick. You're gonna get more notoriety. You're gonna get some ad that isn't shit. The ad that isn't shit turns into good ads. The good ads turn into better ads. The better ads turn into somebody will give you $170 million to make whatever that Rupert Sanders movie was. Sleepy Hollow? Sleepy something. That's going to happen. And I'm not going to guarantee you that, but there's a chance. You got a better chance at the Film and Music Conference than sitting on your ass doing fuck-all-skis. Okay, so we got them. We got Laura Gonzalez. She's a DP. Her style and essence she brings to every stunning project she's a part of, and it's completely unmistakable. She shot commercial projects for the brands Canon, Guinness, Microsoft, and Michelob, as well as music videos for Bjork and Sigur Rós, and several award-winning films. She knows the business. She is the business. She's going to be showing you, not only in breakouts, but in speeches, how to do things, how to make things right, how a professional set is going to work, the lighting requirements that you need. So if you're just starting out, it's a fantastic opportunity to see a professional cinematographer at work. If you're established, it's always good. I mean, I get ideas. I'm trying to glean ideas from everywhere, trying to figure out how people do shit. Every time I work with a different gaffer, I'm asking, do you ever work with this so-and-so? How did they do this? How did they do that? Just to say, maybe I'll never use it, but at least I can tell myself when I'm not using it, hey, I'm doing something fucking so-and-so didn't do. Feeling pretty good about that. Doesn't look like shit. So I can compare myself in my head to these people that I'll never meet. And that makes me feel good. Okay. And then you've got Dallas Taylor, who is at De Facto Sound. He launched it. He's led thousands of high-profile projects ranging from blockbuster game trailers to Sundance Award-winning films, advertisements, Nike, Adidas, all those big ones that we've talked about many, many times. Sound design extraordinaire. If I could think of someone off the top of my head who is more prolific in sound design, they're probably out there. But as someone that is not interested in sound at all outside of a podcast, I know Dallas's name. That's something, right? He's got to know what he's doing, and he does really good stuff. So I would encourage you to go look it up and then think to yourself, do I want my projects to sound like that? Well, you're going to have to come to the conference, aren't you? And you can come with free tickets, or you can use the code. If you're not the one lucky person to win the free ticket, you can come and get a little bit of a discount using the code WanderingDP. That will save you 10%, and the tickets are $599, but you get the tenner. You're doing pretty good for yourself there. That's a good day's work, you know? You can tell your folks, hey, just made 10%. Filmandmusic.com is where you can find more. And they've got some crazy good stuff as well. Don't forget the discount for your music as well. If you're going to go to musicbed.com, it's Wandering 20, I think, is 20% off your next on-site license. So use that as well, because we want to let the Music Bay people know that we appreciate them sponsoring the show, that we're going to try and take care of them when we can. They've got amazing music. They've got lots of talented people, 650 artists and composers, and you've got projects. They've got music. Sort of sorts itself out, doesn't it? Okay, that is going to do it for this edition of the podcast. Many thanks to you for checking it out, and again, for sharing, for supporting on Patreon, for leaving a review on iTunes. It all makes a big difference. And if you're in Los Angeles next week, let me know, because I'm going to be there. Should be there for a week, doing something fun, which will be really good for the podcast. Okay, that's going to do it. We'll see you in the next one.
You've been listening to the Wandering DP podcast. For more information on the topics discussed in this episode and for show notes, visit www.wanderingdp.com. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to rate, like, and subscribe on iTunes.